The Cassidy and Haynes families were at a loss for words. Stephen wouldn't be able to meet any of the criteria that the Addams family had set for him. It was actually Terrence and Laurel who had set these criteria. Laurel was particularly harsh. After a long discussion, the Cassidy and Haynes families came to a unanimous agreement that Stephen would definitely lose if he provoked the Addams family. Therefore, they immediately sent him a message telling him to plead for them to spare him. "They want me to plead with the Addams family?" Stephen said in disbelief when he checked his phone. "Not a chance!" He responded to their message with the exact same words. Helen, Gordon, and Mavis were furious, but there was nothing they could do about it. "Stephen, do what you have to do," Kim said, sitting beside him. "I'll stay here and take care of my health and our child." Terrence's succession ceremony was coming up, and his reputation had reached its peak. Even those from the Addams family who still had doubts about him had no choice but to acquiesce. His way of handling his illegitimate son had been too perfect. They couldn't help but admire him. Illegitimate children among wealthy families were common and a huge headache. Members of wealthy families were desirable, and there was no shortage of illegitimate children. But it was considered a big mistake because the illegitimate child would not be acknowledged. Not only that, the reputation of the person who made the mistake would also be affected. Terrence's bet set an example for these people. It gave them hope that they would be able to get away with it. All of a sudden, compliments for the Addams family were on the rise. They bragged about them, hoping to win their favor. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. It was finally the day of Terrence's succession ceremony. At the Addams family's residence, Terrence, who was especially well-dressed for the occasion, was escorted by Johan and Laurel to the armchair at the center of the main hall. This seat represented the peak of power. After the ceremony, he would become the official head of the family. The previous generations of elders would retire and live in seclusion. They would no longer be involved with the family affairs. Terrence would have full authority. This was a long-standing tradition of the family. Terrence took a seat on the armchair and swept his gaze over the family below. He'd done it. He'd reached the summit. "Congratulations to Terrence Addams, our new family head. He will lead us to a glorious future." The official announcement signaled the conclusion of the succession ceremony. That night, Terrence invited the other branches of the Addams family to their home for a celebration. There was no end to the congratulations from the other family leaders. After an evening of eating and drinking, the guests gradually dispersed. In the end, Terrence, Laurel, and Johan were the only ones left. "I've been waiting for this day," Terrence said. He downed his glass of wine. "My position is official. No one can compete with me." Johan lifted his glass for a toast. "Speaking of which, we have Stephen to thank. It's because of him that your succession went smoothly." "You're right. I wonder what his reaction would be if he knew that I reached the top with his help." Terrence took out his phone to give Stephen a call. "Have you heard, Stephen? My succession ceremony is over. I'm now the head of the Addams family." "Is that so? Then congratulations. You sound excited. It must have been important since he called me just to let me know." "You should already know the reason I called. That secret of mine you found out about, it's no threat to me anymore. You can expose me if you want to. It makes no difference. Don't think you have the upper hand just because you had my weakness. You'll only ever be an illegitimate child. I have one heir, and that's Johan." Stephen chuckled. "Terrence, you think too highly of yourself. There's always someone stronger than you." Terrence mimicked his laugh. "I'm the head of the Addams family. Who could be stronger than me?" "You'll find out in a year. You and the Addams family only have 1 year to prepare. You'll regret not seizing this opportunity when you had the chance." Stephen had never regarded the Addams family as an opponent because they weren't worthy of that title. Terrence was no longer surprised by Stephen's bold remarks. "Your arrogance is outstanding, but it's no use talking big. I advise you to think it over. Admitting defeat and kneeling for forgiveness in a year's time would be the wisest choice." Terrence hung up without waiting for a reply. "He's so stubborn. I don't know where he got that personality from." "Why are you getting so angry over a nobody?" Johan said. Just forget about him. He's no match for us. Relying on the Wyvern Group alone to go against us is a mistake, Laurel echoed. Isn't that his biggest achievement? Johann asked. Okay, I've decided. Before the year is up, I'll ruin the Wyvern Group. Then I'll have nothing to brag about. I'd like to see just how he plans on coming for us without his company. I'll leave you to it, Terence said. With Johann here, he wouldn't have to lift a finger. Johann quickly launched a commercial attack on Stephen's company. After becoming the leading company in Washington, D.C., the Wyvern Group's rapid development gave it necessary momentum to expand across the country. But one day, out of the blue, their expansion was met with untimely resistance. First, they had several large projects with other states, but their business partners canceled the contract for no reason and were willing to pay a sky-high penalty. Second, a few business management organizations inspected the company every now and then. There were no issues, but the inspectors somehow found something during every inspection to complain about. This made it incredibly difficult for the Wyvern Group to continue its expansion. They were bound to Santa Ana and Washington, D.C. Jasmine, who was in charge of the company's daily operations, began to feel frustrated and a little discouraged. She had a discussion with Kim, but they couldn't come up with any good solutions. Why don't we ask Stephen? Jasmine asked. He's the owner. Even if he looks like he doesn't care about company matters on the surface, he's always one step ahead of everyone else. Kim remembered that when she encountered complicated situations she couldn't resolve in the past, Stephen would always have a solution. Okay, let's go look for him. The two of them left the office and found Stephen in the lobby. I already knew about that. Johann's behind it. He's using Imperial Holdings as a cover, Stephen explained, meeting Jasmine and Kim's expectant gazes. Kim, you should focus on taking care of yourself. As for the Wyvern Group and Tanith Corporation, Jasmine can handle it. Jasmine's brows furrowed. Mr. Adams, that's not the problem here. Our company is being suppressed. I know. You don't have to bother with them. If they want to suppress us, then let them. You just need to defend our company the best you can. Jasmine and Kim exchanged a glance. The bet with the Adams family had only just begun, but Stephen was already feeling discouraged. With his half-hearted determination, how was he planning to confront them in a year's time? Kim sighed. Had Stephen given up? What had happened to his ambition and motivation? And was he going to let his hard work go down the drain like this? In reality, Stephen wasn't bothered by the so-called number one family's tricks. He wanted to spend a relaxing year with Kim during her pregnancy and make sure that she wasn't under any stress. This was the most important thing to him. Johann's tricks were last on the list of his priorities. Jasmine and Kim looked worried, so Stephen tried to reassure them. Kim's health is important. You two don't need to worry about the bet between me and the Adams family. I'm going to win. Stephen's confidence made Kim even more worried. Stephen, I know you're talented. The success of the Wyvern Group is enough to make other young entrepreneurs respect you. But there are many people out there who have achieved even more than you. I'm not saying this to put you down. I'm just saying that maybe it's a good idea to expand your horizons. Stephen didn't want Kim to worry about the bet or the company, so he could only agree. Okay, I understand. I'll come up with a strategy to deal with the Adams family, and I'll take our company's affairs seriously. Kim was satisfied with his answer. However, Stephen was only pretending to be working hard. Aside from being the Grand Palace Master, his identity as the Commander-in-Chief alone was enough to take down the Adams family. The Wyvern Group wasn't in danger because of Johann and Imperial Holdings. As a result, Stephen's hard work didn't seem to have any effect. The Wyvern Group continued to be restricted by Imperial Holdings. They couldn't expand their business. Imperial Holdings' continuous aggression gave the public the impression that Stephen and the Wyvern Group were powerless to resist. They were gradually being eroded. The fiasco caused a heated discussion in the district. Everyone believed that in less than half a year, the Wyvern Group would be monopolized by Imperial Holdings. The Adams family mainly exerted their influence in Washington, D.C. and Maryland. It was well known across the country that the capital of Maryland, Annapolis, was home to an abundance of high-ranking officials. Even a small-time section chief was considered a big shot in comparison to other states. Annapolis was also home to the wealthiest families in the country. The upper-class families were divided into 5 tiers. The first tier was the Beaumont families. They had been at the top for as long as anyone could remember. The second tier was the Imperial families. They were 1 tier lower than the Beaumont families, but there was a significant gap between them. The third tier was the Royal families. Although they shared the same title as the royal families in New York City, they were considered 1 tier higher than them because their status and resources were superior. The fourth and fifth tiers included the noble families, which were further divided depending on their affiliation with the royal family. Needless to say, if they belonged to a royal family, their status was much higher. David's family business was based in Washington, D.C., but their residence was located in the suburbs of Maryland. They were a noble family that had submitted to a royal family in Annapolis, so their status was higher than the ordinary noble family. The Addams family was similar in a sense that while their business was based in Washington, D.C., their home was in Maryland. Their influence was divided between the district and Annapolis, with the latter having the majority. But the difference between them and David's family was that they didn't need to rely on a royal family, because they were already at the top. The Lindsay family in Annapolis was particularly well known. At this time, the core members of their family were having a meeting in the hall. A young lady wearing a white dress was in attendance. Her name was Celeste Lindsay. When she turned 18, she was ranked first on the list of the 4 most beautiful women in Annapolis. The other 3 women thought of her as their leader. It had been 10 years since then, but no one had ever replaced them. Celeste was 28 years old, but no one was qualified to be her successor, nor had they come close to shaking her position. The bet between Stephen and Terrence had caused a huge commotion in Annapolis. The Lindsay family was a royal family, so they didn't have a right to question the Addams family. But more than 20 years ago, Terrence had proposed an arranged marriage for Stephen to prevent Victoria from acting up. Celeste had been chosen to be Stephen's partner. Stephen was Terrence's illegitimate son, but the Addams family's blood still flowed inside him. The arranged marriage was a chance for the Lindsay family to establish a connection with the Addams family. But even if they wanted to refuse, they wouldn't dare because of the Addams family's reputation. After the arranged marriage was proposed, the Lindsay family waited for Celeste to grow up and marry Stephen when she turned 18. But nothing went as planned. Stephen went to Santa Ana and was eventually kicked out of the Addams family. He became the target of a large manhunt. In the end, he disappeared from the upper-class circles. There'd been no news about Stephen until recently, and Terrence never reached out to them, but they couldn't ask him to cancel the engagement. Unbeknownst to the Lindsay family, Terrence had long forgotten about the engagement. Celeste was bound to an arranged marriage, and she couldn't fall in love with anyone else. Many of her friends were already married, and she had no choice but to stay single. There were many men who had courted her, but she'd been forced to turn them all down. When news of Stephen's soon-to-be child spread to Annapolis, the Lindsay family was the first to hear about it, and they were infuriated. Not only was Stephen married, but his wife was also pregnant. The head of the family held an emergency meeting to discuss countermeasures. He was the first to speak when the core members were gathered. "I didn't think he'd be so foolish and challenge the Addams family just to make them accept him. In my opinion, he's not worthy of my daughter," Celeste's father replied. "I heard he set up a company in a small place like Washington, D.C., and thinks that's enough to fight the Addams family. He was kicked out of the family 6 years ago, and he provoked Johan in the present. He's even less qualified than before to join them again. This is our best chance to cancel the engagement." Celeste's eyes lit up. She'd been waiting years for this moment. The head of the family agreed. "You're right. We can't let Celeste continue to be restricted by this arranged marriage. Celeste would be turning 30 in 2 years. They couldn't let her be bound by an engagement any longer. What I mean is, since we know that Stephen's alive, we should find him and have him personally tear up the contract. If the Addams family questions us, we can shift the blame to him instead. What do you all think?" Celeste's father raised his hand. "I agree, but we can't let Celeste go there by herself. Stephen's not qualified to see her in person." The rest of the family agreed. Celeste had kept her position as the most beautiful woman in Annapolis for 10 years. If she hadn't been restricted by the arranged marriage, the number of her admirers was enough to line up from Annapolis all the way to Washington, D.C. Even so, there were still countless rich kids who had secretly expressed their love to Celeste. An illegitimate child who was abandoned by the Addams family didn't deserve her. If we don't send Celeste, who should we send? The head of the family looked around. Sending someone middle-aged or older was more than Stephen was worth, and among the younger generation, there were no talents aside from Celeste. This was precisely the reason why the head of the family had been thrilled when Terrence first proposed the arranged marriage. Establishing a link to the Addams family would revive the Lindsay family. If Celeste and Stephen married as planned, their child wouldn't meet the standards of the Addams family, because half of its blood would be from Stephen, who was Terrence's illegitimate son. But the child would be vulnerable to the Lindsay family because having the Addams family's blood was enough to bring their family out of their gradual decline over the years. The head of the family was in a dilemma, so Celeste suggested, "Grandpa, remember Anna, Brooke, and Eva? They're my friends. I'll ask them to head to Washington, D.C. and make Stephen tear up the contract." The head of the family knew about them. Their family statuses were slightly lower than the Lindsay family, but that was enough. They would sure do a good job. After the family meeting ended, Celeste contacted her 3 friends, who immediately agreed to her request. They boarded the next flight to Washington, D.C. When they arrived, they took a short break at a tea house and asked for the address of the Wyvern Group. While they were there, they heard many guests discussing the bet between Stephen and the Addams family. Anna leaned in and whispered, "This Stephen sure is popular. I wonder what he looks like." "I, for one, don't care," Brooke said. "He's just an illegitimate son. How special can he be? If you ask me, it's a good thing that he was kicked out of the family. Otherwise, he would have married Celeste and benefited from her family." Eva shook her head. "I heard his wife is pregnant. Someone like him doesn't deserve Celeste." To them, unless it was someone like Johan, no one would have the qualifications to marry Celeste. "If it weren't for Stephen, Celeste would have been married by now," Anna grumbled. Brooke let out a sigh. "I know, but once Stephen rips the contract, she'll be free." Eva nodded. "Haven't you seen the way Celeste looks at Theon? He looks at her in the same way. They're a perfect match. They can finally be together after this is over. By the way, did you know Theon's rank went up to 2nd place?" Anna and Brooke sucked in a breath. In Annapolis, there was a list of rankings of the upper-class younger generation. It ranked the top 50 most promising members of high society. Terrence had made the list when he was young. This was an achievement that was only natural for the head of the Addams family. Nowadays, for various reasons, members of Beaumont families were no longer on the list. However, the 50 people on the list were the best of the younger generation in the whole country. Even the person ranked last was far superior to Dashiell Moran from New York City. Celeste's admirer, Tien Valle, was from a royal family in Annapolis. The fact that he was ranked 2nd on the list proved that he was influential and capable. As for Anna, Brooke, and Eva, they were proud of their royal family background. They had no interest in Washington, D.C., and they were especially unimpressed when they found the Wyvern Group. They stood in front of the entrance and examined the building. "Is this it?" Anna asked. "It's smaller than I thought. I'm not trying to brag, but my family could take them down in no time. It would even be easier for Tien." "Yeah, it can't be compared to Annapolis," Brooke said. "Any of our families can ruin them. Stephen has no right to challenge the Addams family." "Just thinking about it makes me laugh," Eva said. The 3 of them strode up to the security guards and demanded an audience with Stephen. The assistant director of the security department, Tony, could tell from their demeanor that they weren't ordinary people. He decided to inform Stephen, who was confused because he hadn't been expecting anyone. "Well, just let them in." Stephen wrapped up his discussion with Jasmine and headed to the reception room. 3 young women were waiting for him. He didn't recognize either of them. "I'm Stephen. May I ask who you are?" Anna interrupted them. "So you're Stephen." She looked him up and down in disdain. "I heard you challenged the Addams family. I was wondering what you look like, but you're only average." "Stop wasting time," Brooke said impatiently. "Stephen, we're from Annapolis. We came today to cancel the arranged marriage contract." That's right, Eva said. Hurry up and take out your half of the contract. Stephen stared at them in confusion. What contract? I think you have the wrong person. He was happily married to Kim, and she was pregnant with their child. 3 strange women had come out of nowhere and declared that he had an arranged marriage. All the signs pointed to a scam. Anna put her hands on her hips. No, we didn't get it wrong. You're the one we're looking for. Stephen still looked confused, so she told Brooke to bring him up to speed. Listen up, Stephen. Your father, Terrence, and your biological mother, Victoria, made an agreement with the Lindsay family in Annapolis. You have an arranged marriage with Celeste Lindsay. I've never heard of her. If you know what's good for you, I suggest you stop pretending. Stephen was Terrence's illegitimate son. How could he not know about his own arranged marriage? Besides, Victoria was from a royal family in New York City. Her status would soar if her son married Celeste. Why would she keep it a secret from him? In reality, neither Terrence nor Victoria had informed Stephen. Why would I pretend about something like this? Wait here, I'll ask my mother. I'm warning you now, if you're trying to scam me, I won't let it go. Anna, Brooke, and Eva scowled at Stephen's back as he left the room. Who did he think he was to threaten them? They were the daughters of wealthy families. If anything, they should be looking down on him. Go ahead and ask, Anna called after him. Then you'll know that we're telling the truth. Stephen ignored them and stepped into the hallway. He gave Victoria a call. 10 minutes later, she arrived at the Wyvern Group. She was also puzzled upon seeing the 3 women. They told me they're from Annapolis, and they said you and Terrence signed a contract for an arranged marriage between me and someone from the Lindsay family, Stephen explained. Is that true? All of a sudden, the memories of more than 2 decades ago came rushing back. I remember now. It's true. At that time, Terrence told me that he wanted to set up an arranged marriage between you and Celeste Lindsay. I agreed to it, but many unexpected things happened later, so this was left unsettled. I'm sorry to say that I forgot about it until today. She turned to Anna, Brooke, and Eva. It's been more than 20 years since then. Celeste should be around 28 years old. She must have delayed finding a partner because of the contract. I'm very sorry. Anna was furious. Victoria, you're really something. You forced Celeste to be alone for so many years because of this contract that never meant anything in the first place. Your son is married, and his child is about to be born. But have you ever thought about Celeste? She couldn't fall in love with anyone. If it weren't for you, this contract wouldn't even exist, Brooke yelled. I see you still don't want to cancel the contract. You want to use this to get your son to return to the Addams family. Eva was even more agitated. For the sake of your selfish desires and your ambitious goals, you would rather ruin an innocent girl's life. The 3 of them yelled at Victoria in rapid succession. Victoria felt guilty. Celeste had been alone all her life because of this contract that neither she nor Terrence had remembered. Are you 3 done? Stephen interjected. Terrence is the head of the family. He's in charge. Anna gave him a sideways glance. And? Are you trying to change the topic? No, Terrence is the one who proposed the arranged marriage. If you want to cancel it, then you should go talk to him. Why are you pestering us? Anna, Brooke, and Eva glanced at each other. Look for Terrence and talk to him. That was like asking to be killed. Everyone knew that Terrence was the reason why the arranged marriage existed in the first place. One word from him and the predicament would be resolved immediately. But the problem was, who would have the courage to look for him? Terrence had just officially taken over the Addams family. The only people they could blame were Stephen and Victoria. Stephen, don't interrupt, Anna said. This has nothing to do with Mr. Terrence. Don't try to shift the blame to him. Brooke joined in quickly. That's right. Hurry up and tear your half of the contract so we can forget about this. It's the best outcome for you and Celeste. Sorry, but I don't have the contract, Stephen said. Terrence has it, Victoria explained when Anna, Brooke, and Eva looked confused. The 3 of them were flushed with embarrassment. It didn't seem like Victoria was lying. Brooke had an idea. It doesn't matter. she whispered to her friends. Celeste gave me the other half of the contract before we came. Stephen can just tear that one. Eva was impressed. Good idea. We'll record a video of him. We can just blame him if the Addams family comes after us. She took out her phone and prepared to record. Brooke took out the Lindsay family's half of the contract and shoved it into Stephen's hands. This is it. Tear it already. Silence enveloped the room as Stephen smoothed the contract and calmly read through it. Anna was getting impatient. Hey, hurry it up. Why are you reading it so carefully? You're going to tear it anyway. What's the point? We don't have time to waste, Brooke and Eva urged. Don't bother Celeste any more than you already have. Stephen paid them no mind and casually stuffed the contract into his pocket. He met Victoria's guilty gaze. Mom, you have to understand that the person who restricted Celeste with the contract wasn't you or me. It was Terrence. Victoria hesitated. He wasn't wrong. What are you trying to do? Anna demanded. It's simple. If Celeste wants me to cancel the contract, then tell her to come in person. What right do you three have to criticize my mother? The one who made the contract with the Lindsay family was Terrence. This could easily be solved if you went to him directly. But I guess none of you have the courage. It wasn't that Stephen couldn't tear the contract, but it was obvious why they were making him do the job. They were just trying to make him the scapegoat. Not only were they rude and disrespectful, but they also criticized Victoria when she wasn't at fault. Anna, Brooke, and Eva were furious. Stephen, how shameless can you be? Brooke demanded. You're married. Your wife is pregnant. Why are you still clinging to Celeste? Brooke, can't you tell? Eva asked. He's a scumbag. He thinks that Celeste can help him return to the Addams family. And when he succeeds, he can have 2 women he can take turns enjoying by his side. Anna pointed an accusing finger at Stephen. Who do you think you are? Anyone who's interested in Celeste can kill you in an instant. Do you know that? Stephen looked on indifferently. I'll tell you again. If Celeste wants me to break the contract, then tell her to find me personally. He didn't pay them any more attention and asked Tony to kick them out of the building. The 3 of them lost all face. Anna looked up and glared at the top floor of the building. I think he wants Celeste to come to the district to blackmail her and her family. That has to be it, Brooke said. Celeste is the most beautiful woman in Annapolis. Which man wouldn't be tempted? Stephen's worse than a beast. Eva agreed. Celeste has a high status. Even Johan, the successor of the Addams family, has to treat her with respect. Stephen just wants to use the contract to reap benefits from the Lindsay family. The 3 of them nodded in mutual understanding. Anna, what should we do now? Brooke asked. There's no time to lose. We should inform Celeste and her family as soon as possible. It'll be hard for us 3 to deal with Stephen alone, so the Lindsay family should handle it personally. Just as Anna was about to call Celeste, her phone rang. She looked up in surprise. It's Tian. Tian had heard that Celeste had entrusted Anna, Brooke, and Eva to take care of the arranged marriage contract, so he'd been paying close attention to them. If they succeeded, he would be free to pursue Celeste. Some time had passed, and he was getting impatient, so he called Anna to get an update on the situation. How's it going, Anna? Is it done? Sorry, not yet. Stephen refused to rip up the contract. He demanded Celeste to see him in person. What? He's just an illegitimate son. What right does he have to meet Celeste? Exactly. I think he has an ulterior motive. No wonder the Addams family kicked him out. He even chased the 3 of us out of his company. The more Anna ranted, the more wronged she felt. Compared to Annapolis, this place was like the countryside. She did not deserve to be treated like this by country bumpkins. He must be out of his mind, Tian said. Anna, wait for me in the district. I'll go there myself and deal with that ignorant bastard. Tian had been in love with Celeste for many years. The only reason he hadn't confessed yet was because of her arranged marriage with Stephen. From what he'd heard from Anna, it seemed like Stephen was trying to stop him from getting together with Celeste. You are going to take care of it personally? Anna asked in anticipation. Tian was ranked 2nd among the younger generation in Annapolis, and his strength was not to be underestimated. An illegitimate son would be no match for him. After her discussion with Tian, she gave Celeste a call and told her what had happened with Stephen. Celeste stormed out of her room and went to find the head of the family and her father. "He wants me to go to Washington, D.C. and ask him in person. Wouldn't our family's reputation be affected if I requested something from an illegitimate son like him?" "But there's no other way," her father said. The head of the family thought it over. "It's worth it if it means Celeste can be happy. It's just this one time. Her future is more important than her reputation." Celeste's father agreed. "She can find a good partner after the engagement is annulled. I heard Tien Val has been in love with her for many years." "He's been protecting her from the sidelines for a long time," the head of the family echoed. "He'll be a suitable husband for her." "That's enough," Celeste cut in, feeling embarrassed. "We're straying from the point." Her father and the head of the family exchanged a knowing smile. From her reaction, she most likely had feelings for Tien as well. "All right, go to Washington, D.C. and find Stephen. Ask him to cancel the contract. Can you do that?" "I have to. But Grandpa, he's trying to blackmail me. I might not be able to deal with him alone." The head of the family considered their options. No one among the younger generation in the Lindsay family would be capable enough to go with her, and it would be shameful for her father to accompany her. While they were racking their brains, Tien arrived. He volunteered to accompany Celeste to Washington, D.C. The head of the family nodded in approval. "That's a good idea. We'll be at ease knowing that you'll be by her side." Tien had been promoted to second place in the rankings, so they both trusted him with Celeste's safety. Not to mention, with Tien there, Stephen wouldn't be able to refuse, even if he wanted to. They were all displeased that Celeste had been tied down by the arranged marriage for more than 2 decades, but none of them could vent their anger on Terrence. "Thank you for trusting me," Tien said. "It's not appropriate for her grandfather or her father to go with her, but it'll be fine if I went. After we take care of the contract, we'll come back immediately and I'll propose to Celeste. I promise I'll make her happy for the rest of her life." Celeste's cheeks reddened at his bold confession. She looked prettier than ever, and for a second, Tien was lost in her beauty. Celeste's father patted his shoulder. "I have high hopes for you. Time is of the essence. Leave as soon as you can. The sooner this is resolved, the better it will be for you two." "I won't let you down," Tien promised. And so, Celeste and Tien boarded the next flight to Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, Stephen was having lunch with Victoria and Kim at the villa. These days, he rarely showed up at the Wyvern group and stayed home to accompany Kim. "Stephen, what do you think about breaking the arranged marriage contract?" Victoria said. "Those people were from the royal families in Annapolis. They won't leave this alone." "If you kept the contract, doesn't that mean you're interested in her?" Kim teased. "That will depend on you. If you agree, I'll marry her immediately." Kim rolled her eyes dramatically. "Are those words really coming out of my husband's mouth?" Stephen laughed. "I'm just kidding. To be honest, I would have torn the contract right away if they didn't criticize my mother right in front of me. I'll just make them wait a bit longer." "Okay, but handle it properly. They're from royal families." Stephen's bet with Terrence was looming over their heads, and Kim didn't want him to make enemies from all sides. "Don't worry, I know what to do." At 6 o'clock in the evening, Celeste and Tien arrived in Washington, D.C. To ensure Celeste's safety, Tien brought 5 bodyguards with him. They were elite subordinates of his family. The first thing they did after leaving the airport was meet up with Anna, Brooke, and Eva. Anna was still fuming from the earlier incident. "You're finally here!" Not only did Stephen refuse to rip up the contract, he even sent someone to chase us out. We're from established families in Annapolis. Shouldn't he be treating us like distinguished guests? "Calm down," Tien said. "He was brave enough to challenge the Addams family. He probably has a few screws loose." "If he wasn't crazy, he would have never made that bet," Brooke said. Celeste wasn't in the mood to joke around. "I don't care if he's crazy or sane. I'm just worried that he won't break the engagement even though I'm here. What should we do if that happens?" Before leaving the airport, she'd washed off her makeup and threw on a plain shirt and a pair of jeans. She wanted to make herself look distraught. That way, Stephen would see how unhappy she was and maybe tear the contract out of the goodness of his heart. But Celeste was beautiful even without makeup, and her plain outfit couldn't hide her curvaceous figure. "He wouldn't dare," Tien said. "With me here, he'll agree in a heartbeat. If he doesn't, I'll make him regret it." He was so confident that Celeste's worries lightened just a bit. Tien and Celeste set off for the Wyvern group, but Stephen wasn't there. They used their connections to find his address, and soon they were standing in front of the gates to the villa. Tien introduced himself to the security guard, and he made sure to mention his family's name. "We're from Annapolis. Which house is Stephen's?" The security guard eyed them suspiciously. "You're looking for Stephen? You'll have to call him and confirm with him before we let you inside." "I don't have his number." "Then I'm sorry, I can't let you in." Tien clenched his fists as anger swelled inside him. As the successor to the Val family and ranked second amongst his peers in Annapolis, he was treated like a VIP back home. It was ridiculous to be stopped by this small-time security guard in Washington, D.C. Celeste quickly grabbed his arm and pulled him back, signaling for him to calm down. She smiled at the security guard. "I'm sorry. My name is Celeste Lindsay. My friend and I are from Annapolis. We came all the way here because we have something to discuss with Stephen. Please let him know that I'm here. If you tell him my name, he'll understand." "All right, I can do that for you. Please wait here." The security guard had been working here for a while, so naturally he knew which house belonged to Stephen. "Celeste Lindsay's here? Okay, tell her I'm having dinner right now. I'll see her when I'm done. Have her wait outside." The security guard relayed Stephen's message to Celeste and her friends. "He wants us to wait here?" Tien demanded. "He's obviously looking down on us." Being given the cold shoulder was insulting. Not to mention, Stephen was an illegitimate son. "I have to teach him a lesson right now." Celeste was also angry, but she stopped him anyway. "Hold on, we should do as he says and wait here. Our goal is to get him to break the contract. We should go along with him for now." Tien heaved a sigh. "All right, the second he rips that contract, I'll give him a good beating." As the minutes dragged on, they were beginning to doubt that Stephen was having dinner. But at this time, Stephen was really in the middle of a meal. He'd invited Dennis, Rosalind, Zachary, and Jaden over for dinner. "Did you know your arranged marriage partner, Celeste Lindsay, is famous for her beauty in Annapolis?" Rosalind asked. "According to the city rankings, she's the first place. She's had this position for 10 years. She came all the way here just to see you. Aren't you curious about her?" Stephen shrugged. "Not really." Kim was the most beautiful woman in his eyes. "Oh, by the way, she's not alone," Rosalind said. "She's with some guy named Tien Val. He's ranked second amongst the younger generation in Annapolis." She'd found out about them the moment their flight landed in Washington, D.C. She was in charge of intelligence, so nothing could get past her. "Tien Val," Dennis murmured. Rosalind, Zachary, and Jaden looked at him. They couldn't read his expression, but it sounded like he knew who Tien was. Stephen gave him a knowing look. "Dennis, your hometown is Annapolis, right?" "Yeah, back then Dennis trailed off, not knowing where to begin. Stephen didn't know much about Dennis's past before he joined the military. He only knew that his mentor, Adrian Wynne, was the one who had found him and brought him to the military camp. And under Stephen's leadership, Dennis became the leader of the 4 great generals. When they first met, it was evident that Dennis was strong, and he was from Annapolis. Stephen guessed that he was either from a royal family or maybe even a Beaumont family. "Dennis, why did Aiden bring you to the military camp back then?" Stephen asked. Those that were selected by Adrian were talented, but they'd also been through a lot. Stephen's history with the Addams family was a prime example. He knew that Adrian had freed Dennis from the Imperial prison. Inmates in the Imperial prison were typically heinous criminals, bounty targets, or felons from wealthy families. He speculated that Dennis was the latter. "It's a long story," Dennis said with a sigh. "I'm from the LeBlanc family in Annapolis. It's a royal family. You guys might not have heard about them, but they're ranked first among the royal families in the city." "I didn't know you were from such a prominent background," Rosalind remarked. The identities of the 4 great generals were confidential, and like Terence, they had a confidentiality level of SSS. Rosalind's expertise was intelligence, but even she wouldn't be able to investigate the background of her comrades without attracting the attention of the highest authority in the country. "I'm the oldest son of the LeBlanc family, and my combat strength was ranked first. I used to be the successor, and I thought I'd eventually become the head of the family. But then my second uncle's son returned from overseas. Whether it was knowledge or experience, he surpassed me in every way. Other than his martial arts being inferior to mine, he was perfect. The entire family unanimously agreed that my cousin was the ideal candidate to shoulder the heavy responsibility of leading the family. I gave up my position as the successor, and the family appointed me as his full-time bodyguard. I thought I would spend the rest of my days protecting him, but then..." Dennis took a deep breath before continuing. "Like Mr. Adams, I also had an arranged marriage. Her family came to propose. I got drunk on the night of the wedding, and when I woke up, I found my wife having sex with my cousin in bed. My cousin and I got into a fight, and my wife ended up dead. My cousin immediately gathered the rest of my family and accused me of killing my own wife on the night of my wedding. They sent me to prison on an unwarranted charge." Stephen exchanged glances with Rosalind, Zachary, and Jaden. That was hard to believe. "Isn't that a bit of a stretch?" Rosalind pointed out. "Is everyone in your family an idiot? Your cousin's story is full of loopholes, and it's obvious that you didn't lay a hand on her. You're not that kind of person." Dennis sighed. "There's something you don't know. My cousin's a great actor. He knows exactly what to say and how to manipulate his facial expression to string other people along. In front of the family, he's always acted like a role model for the younger generation, so no one suspected him of hooking up with my wife. And my wife's family felt like he had a brighter future than me. Even if they investigated and found out the truth, they would have turned a blind eye. That's why my family took my cousin's word over mine." Stephen nodded in understanding. Back when he was with the Adams family, Terence and Laurel had neglected him, and that allowed the other members to bully him. He'd experienced being framed multiple times. Scheming and plotting against each other for power was common in upper-class families. "What's your cousin's name?" Stephen asked. "It's been years since then. He should be famous now, right?" "Yeah, his name is Dimitri LeBlanc." Rosalind's eyes widened. "Isn't he ranked first among the younger generation in Annapolis? He's above Tien." "Yes, he is." "I heard Terence was ranked first back in the day," Stephen said. "Seems like that position is only reserved for the worst of humanity." Dennis smiled bitterly. "I thought I was more skilled in martial arts than Dimitri, but after I was locked up in the Imperial prison, he used one short year to rise to the top of the rankings. He was popular among the younger generation. He most likely won them over with his fake personality." "Was he really stronger than you?" Stephen asked, a little surprised. Dennis was slightly weaker than Zachary and Jaden, but that didn't make him weak by any means. There was a reason why he was the leader of the 4 great generals, even though he wasn't the strongest. If Dimitri was stronger than Dennis, wouldn't that mean he was on par with the 4 great generals? "He was," Dennis said. "After I went to prison, Dimitri came and challenged me to a fight. He defeated me in less than 10 moves. And that's not all. It turned out that my wife wasn't dead. She came to me and told me that only the strong could be her husband. A loser like me wasn't worthy of her, and on the off chance that I was ever released, I would never be able to surpass Dimitri." Dennis unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a deep scar on his chest. "I didn't get this from the battlefield. It was from Dimitri and my wife." Stephen gave him a thoughtful look. "Dennis, if you meet them again, what will you do? Will you be intimidated by them?" Dennis's eyes flashed with determination. "No, I'll reveal the truth and make them pay for what they did to me." It had been a long time since the incident, and Dennis hadn't been able to let it go. If it weren't for Adrian, he would have been stuck in that cold prison cell for the rest of his life. That incident had never left him, and it stayed in the back of his mind. But he'd been with Stephen, Rosalind, Zachary, and Jaden for many years. And what he went through when he was with the LeBlanc family was nothing compared to the battlefield. He'd grown much stronger since then. "Well said," Stephen praised. "It's time for you to take your long-awaited revenge. I'll ask you again, Dennis. If I took you with me to Annapolis and Dimitri stood in front of you, would you be afraid?" "No. I've experienced a lot since then. I'll show him just how far I've come, and I'll make the LeBlanc family regret their decision." "That day will come sooner or later. When the time is right, you and I will go to Annapolis together, and we'll turn the LeBlanc family upside down." "Don't forget about us," Rosalind, Zachary, and Jaden chimed in. The bet between Stephen and the Addams family would take place in less than a year. The four great generals knew that Stephen didn't want to overturn the LeBlanc family. He would turn the entire city upside down. Stephen suddenly remembered something. "Wait, I almost forgot." "What is it?" the four great generals asked in unison, their expressions grave. He glanced at the clock on the wall. "The security guard told me Celeste and Tien were looking for me. It's been 3.5 hours. I wonder if they're still waiting outside. They don't strike me as the patient type." The four great generals exchanged a glance and then burst into laughter. "Waiting 3.5 hours for the commander-in-chief should be an honor," Zachary said. "How many people in the world would even have the opportunity to wait for you?" Dennis, Rosalind, and Jaden agreed. An opportunity like this was hard to come by. Unfortunately, Celeste and Tien didn't know Stephen's real identity. They were still waiting outside the villa. Anna, Brooke, and Eva had joined them. Half an hour passed, then an hour, then 2 hours. 3.5 hours later, Tien finally exploded. "How dare he leave us here waiting? This is ridiculous! I should barge in and make a mess of this place." Celeste was much more patient. "We should wait a bit more. He hasn't broken the contract yet. We shouldn't make things more complicated." Tien relented, but his fists remained clenched. "I'll wait for the sake of our marriage, but I won't let him off after he rips the contract." "Hey, you're still here." Stephen strode up to the gates with his hands in his pockets. "I thought you would have left by now." He glanced at his watch. "It's been 3.5 hours. Sorry, I was with my friends. We were so engrossed in conversation that I forgot." The five of them looked at each other. They had been waiting for 3.5 hours, not because Stephen was busy, but because he'd forgotten about them. Being stood up in a place like Washington, D.C. was unbelievable. "We waited 3.5 hours for you, but you forgot?" Tien hissed. "You'd better come up with a good excuse if you want to end things on a peaceful note." Stephen's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me? What do you want?" The atmosphere turned tense, so Celeste tugged on Tien's arm, signaling for him to calm down. He thought about her words from just before and loosened his fist. "Fine. I'll settle the score with you later. Let's get down to business. Take out the arranged marriage contract and tear it up. Hurry up." Stephen tilted his head slightly in confusion. "Sorry, I don't have an arranged marriage with you." Anna, Brooke, and Eva stifled a laugh. Even Celeste broke into a smile. Tien's expression darkened. "Don't put words in my mouth. I'm talking about the arranged marriage between you and Celeste, not me and you." "Well, why didn't you say so earlier? Are the youths in Annapolis only at this level? If they can't express themselves clearly, then what can they hope to achieve, except coming to a small place like this and embarrassing themselves?" "I'll tell you again," Tien said through clenched teeth. "Tear the contract. I'll give you 30 seconds. "And who do you think you are to make demands?" "I'm Tien Val, ranked second on the list of the top 50 younger generation in Annapolis." "Does that kind of ranking exist?" "Wow, it sounds so scary," Stephen said flatly. "I've never heard of it, though." Tien was so angry that he couldn't get the words out. "If you don't have anything else to say, then step aside. I believe Celeste has something to say to me." Anna, Brooke, and Eva were in disbelief. Tien was ranked second in Annapolis, and he was also the heir to the Val family. But nobody in Washington, D.C. was talking down to him. Tien was a distinguished guest everywhere in Annapolis. He definitely wouldn't let this go. Sure enough, a murderous aura surrounded Tien. If looks could kill, Stephen would have died over 100 times already. Stephen sensed the shift in the atmosphere, but to him, an opponent like Tien was not worth mentioning. Celeste got in between them before their argument could escalate. "I'm Celeste, and I'm here to ask you to break the contract." Stephen gave her a scrutinizing look. Rosalind had told him that according to the people of Annapolis, Celeste was the most beautiful woman in the city. He was curious as to what beauty standards they had in a big city. Celeste took it the wrong way. It was uncomfortable to have Stephen checking her out. It felt like she'd been taken advantage of by a lecher. "Hey, have you seen enough?" she demanded. "Was the illegitimate son of the Addams family always such a pervert? You have a wife. How can you stare at other women with such a dirty look on your eyes? Do you have any shame?" Celeste was angry, but at the same time, she had a bad feeling. What if Stephen took a fancy to her and refused to break the contract? It was possible because back then, Terrence had abandoned Victoria for Laurel. Although the pressure from the Addams family did play a part, in the end, it had been his decision. He chose to marry Laurel. Stephen was Terrence's illegitimate son. It wouldn't be strange if he turned out the same way. Like father, like son. While Celeste was worrying about her future, Stephen smiled and said, "I heard you ranked first among the top 4 beauties in Annapolis." "That's right," she said proudly. "It's thanks to the people in this city. They voted for me." Stephen nodded thoughtfully. "Compared to my wife Kim, you are indeed a little lacking." Celeste was speechless. Being told to her face that she was inferior to someone's wife shattered her pride. Like Tien, she was so angry that she didn't know what to say. Tien had been quietly fuming at the side, but he couldn't take it anymore. "Apologize for what you just said." "What do you mean?" Stephen asked, genuinely confused. "Because you said something you shouldn't have. Saying that Celeste is lacking compared to your wife is the greatest insult. You insulted her for no reason. Shouldn't you apologize?" "I was just stating a fact." "That's not a fact," Brooke interrupted. "In this country, there's no woman who's more beautiful than Celeste." "Apologize for what you said," Anna and Eva demanded. Celeste was the most talented of the Lindsay family's younger generation. She'd been the family's favorite since she was young. Ever since she was called the most beautiful woman in Annapolis on her 18th birthday, no one had ever stolen this title from her. Celeste herself believed in her title wholeheartedly. Comparing her to other women was an insult, and she also thought that she deserved an apology. Stephen looked at Anna, Brooke, and Eva, and then at Tien and Celeste. "I think you 5 have too much free time on your hands. You have nothing better to do than to go around making demands." The 5 of them were from a big city like Annapolis, and whenever they left the city, the locals always catered to them. Eventually, they developed a domineering demeanor that they retained everywhere they went. They didn't see anything wrong with it, because this was what they were used to. Anna decided to take it upon herself to give Stephen a lecture. "Do you even know what it means to be ranked first in beauty in Annapolis? It means Celeste is the most beautiful woman in the country, or maybe even the world. She's had this position for the past 10 years. She is in no way inferior to your wife." Stephen gave them an unimpressed look. "I think you guys should find a hobby instead of coming all the way here just to preach." "Well, I can't apologize for stating the truth, but I can compromise." He turned to Celeste. "You're the leader of the 4 most beautiful women in Annapolis, and you're the prettiest in the universe. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other things to attend to." Stephen turned to leave. "Stop right there." Tien jogged up to him and blocked his path. "What exactly do you mean by that? You were clearly being sarcastic. If you don't apologize to Celeste, don't even think about leaving this place." "You want to stop me? I don't think you have what it takes." "Is that so? Then why don't we test that theory?" Tien assumed an offensive stance, ready to lunge at Stephen. Tien was ranked second for a reason. His martial arts had surpassed everyone else except for one person among the younger generation in Annapolis. Celeste hurriedly got in between them a second time. "Hold on. It's not a crime to not be up to date about Annapolis. You didn't know, so we don't have to apologize. But you have to break the contract. If you do that, we won't bother you again. Tian relaxed and straightened his posture. Making Stephen tear the contract and restore Celeste's freedom was the most important thing right now. There would be plenty of opportunities to deal with him later. Hurry up and rip the contract, Anna, Brooke, and Eva echoed. After all that nonsense, we're finally getting to the point, Stephen said. But you argued with me for so long that I don't have any more time to spare. Sorry, I'm a busy man. The five of them were stunned. It was Celeste who came back to her senses first. Then I'll tell you why we're here. Rip the arranged marriage contract and we'll be on our way. Anna, Brooke, and Eva followed Celeste's lead. That's right, make it quick. It's not hard to rip a piece of paper. Did you think it would be that easy? Stephen asked indifferently. If Tian and Celeste had asked him politely, he would have ripped the contract ages ago. But they were obviously here to pick a fight with him, even though they were the ones who had demands for him. Their attitudes didn't sit right with him. Celeste frowned. Don't tell me you're stalling because you still want to marry me. She was now more certain that Stephen had taken a fancy to her. He was following in his father's footsteps. That would explain why he'd looked at her like that when they met a few minutes ago. Celeste didn't want to marry Stephen. As the most beautiful woman in Annapolis, she had very high standards. Tian was a suitable candidate to be her husband. He was ranked second, after all. Aside from him, only those who were stronger than him would deserve her. For example, Johan Adams. Stephen was an illegitimate son who had been abandoned long ago. He wasn't worthy of her. Just like I thought, Tian said. You want to marry Celeste. Don't even think about it. Whether it's in this life or the next, it's not happening. You can't marry her. But that doesn't mean I won't be able to fulfill another condition of yours. I can ask for anything in return for breaking the contract? Stephen asked. He glanced at Celeste. Is he telling the truth? Celeste was disgusted. Sure enough, after realizing that there was no hope of marrying her, he was resorting to blackmailing her. No wonder he'd been abandoned by the Adams family. He was detestable. Of course I am, Tian said. Tell me, I can give you however much money you want. Stephen laughed. Did you really think I'd want a small fortune of yours? It's nothing worth bragging about. I know you're saying all that because you don't want to raise the price. Tell me, how much do you want? It doesn't matter how much you ask for. I'll give it to you. Tian was going all out to ask for Celeste's hand in marriage. Even if Stephen gave him an astronomical sum, he would still try to get it for him. Stephen shook his head. It seems we're not on the same page. Money isn't important to me. What I want is your apology. The five of them stared at him as he was trying to process his words. You heard me correctly. I want the five of you to apologize to me. Stephen looked at Tian. Especially you. You'll have to get on your knees on top of an apology. Do you even know what you're saying? Tian snapped. You want me to kneel and apologize to you? Don't even think about it. He had always been an influential figure in the upper-class circles in Annapolis. The only two people who could beat him were Dimitri LeBlanc, who was ranked first, and Johan Adams, who wasn't on the list. Celeste, Anna, Brooke, and Eva shared the same thoughts. They were members of royal families. Apologizing to an illegitimate son was something they could never do. Not only were they superior in a small place like Washington, D.C., but they also could never apologize to anyone, not even if they were in the wrong. They had a reputation to maintain for themselves and their families, and it was more important than their lives. Stephen, don't cross the line, Celeste warned. If you don't want money, you can ask for anything else. I'll give it to you. But we can't apologize, not to you. Besides, we haven't done anything that warrants an apology. So you still don't understand, Stephen said. In that case, the five of you should mull it over. When you've figured it out, come look for me. I'll be leaving first. Just as Stephen was about to head back to the villa, Tian stopped him. Wait, you haven't broken the contract yet. You can't leave before you do that. I can leave if I want. Stephen had raised his voice, so the security guards nearby had heard him. They hurried out of the security room to confront Tien and the others. Tien was astonished. He did a quick count of the security guards. There were more than 100 of them. Celeste, Anna, Brooke, and Eva were worried when the situation escalated. The security guard glared at Tien. Are you the one who's causing trouble around here? Tien didn't back down. He would fight if it came down to it. It wouldn't be hard to take them down, even if they had an advantage in numbers. Celeste pulled him back. Tien, don't be reckless. If we resort to violence, who knows if we'll ever break the contract? And he used to be a member of the Addams family. If they find out about this, they'll come after us. Then are we just supposed to let him go? Celeste didn't loosen her grip on his arm. Let's go back and think this over. The 5 of them left and thought hard about Stephen's words. What had they done wrong that required an apology? Several hours passed, but they still couldn't figure it out. They hadn't done anything out of the ordinary. They started chattering. Celeste was the only one who stood off to the side, deep in thought. What do you think, Celeste? Tien asked. Maybe he thought we were too hard on him. Celeste didn't answer. After a moment, she turned to Anna, Brooke, and Eva. I heard the 3 of you criticize his mother in front of him. Is that true? They looked at each other and pondered. Maybe that's why he was so angry, Brooke said. We indeed criticized his mother, but if it wasn't for Terrence and Victoria, your arranged marriage wouldn't even exist. You wouldn't have had to waste so many years alone. Anna and Eva nodded in agreement. They hadn't said anything wrong. Tien snorted. Isn't he just trying to make things harder for us? Is saying something unpleasant about his mother that big of a deal? We can't apologize for something so minor. But if we don't agree to his request, what should we do? Celeste asked. She was worried because Stephen had seemed like the stubborn type. The arranged marriage involved the Addams family, so they had to be careful. I have an idea, Tien said. If we can't use force directly, then we'll use a more secretive method. In the past, he'd used his strength to resolve most of the problematic situations he'd encountered. He'd dealt with them in the open and never used any unorthodox methods. But now, his marriage with Celeste was on the line. He had to take drastic measures. At midnight, I'll break into his home and tie him up. Then I'll force him to rip the contract. If he refuses, I'll deal with him accordingly. Anna applauded him. As expected of you, Tien, your plan just might work. Tien looked proud as he asked Celeste for her opinion. What do you think? Celeste thought about it. I think it's doable. All right, I'll make my move tonight. It just so happened that Tien had brought 5 bodyguards along to protect Celeste when they came to Washington, D.C. They would be more than enough to deal with Stephen. While Tien was in the middle of making preparations, the Addams family's informants caught wind of his plan. They were the #1 family in the country, after all. They had eyes and ears everywhere. Tien and Celeste were well known in Annapolis, so the Addams family had kept an eye on them ever since they left to Washington, D.C. together. When Johan received news that Tien was about to take action against Stephen, he immediately gave Tien a call. Tien wasn't expecting a call from Johan. He picked up and greeted him politely. Although he was ranked 2nd, he still had to treat Johan with respect. After all, the list of the top 50 most prominent youths in Annapolis was ranked by Johan's father, Terrence. Members of Beaumont families weren't on the list, but if Johan was ranked, he would be first. Johan got straight to the point. Tien, are you planning to attack Stephen? Yes, Tien said finally. I know what you're thinking. There's a conflict between the Addams family and Stephen, so you think you can do whatever you want to him. But don't forget, even if we're not on good terms, he does have some affiliation with us. Attacking him is the same as provoking us. Tien's mind raced. Johan's warning was crystal clear. I know you've liked Celeste for many years, and you've always wanted to ask for her hand in marriage, but you should resolve this issue using peaceful means. Any act of violence will be regarded as a provocation towards the Addams family. Do you understand? Johan's thought process was very simple. They could easily deal with an illegitimate son like Stephen, but other people were not allowed to lay a hand on him. Tien caught on quickly. The bet between Stephen and Terrence had already spread. At this point, almost everyone had heard about it. If he made a move against Stephen, it would be the same as looking down on the Addams family. This would give them a reason to wipe out the Val family. I understand, Mr. Johan. Tien sat there in a daze after Johan hung up. Tien looked unsettled after the phone call, so Celeste hurried over to question him. Was that Mr. Johan? What did he say? Whenever the Addams family was involved, the situation would become one of life and death, so Johan's opinion was of utmost importance. Tien snapped out of it at the sound of her voice. Yeah, it was him. He called to warn me. He said that no matter how deep the grudge is between Stephen and the Addams family, he has an affiliation with them. If I attacked Stephen, I would be disregarding the reputation of the Addams family. Mr. Johan told me to resolve this peacefully. Celeste, Anna, Brooke, and Eva fell silent. Everyone knew that Terrence was the one who'd proposed the arranged marriage, and the thought of confronting him was terrifying, so they could only blame Victoria and Stephen for delaying Celeste's marriage for so many years. But after they meet with Stephen, it was obvious that it wouldn't be easy to resolve this through words. I want to deal with this peacefully too, but the problem is... Celeste trailed off and sighed. How are we supposed to do that? Brooke asked. It's impossible. Nothing is impossible, Tien said seriously. But Mr. Johan called me personally, so we can't use force. A warning from the Addams family shouldn't be taken lightly. Then what are we supposed to do? Brooke asked. Is our only option to apologize? Celeste gave Tien a look, which he understood. For the sake of Celeste's future, I'll be a coward for once and lower myself to apologize to that illegitimate son. This was Tien's decision, so Anna, Brooke, and Eva had no choice but to agree. The next day, the 5 of them went back to the villa to look for Stephen. After thinking about it for an entire night, do you finally understand? Stephen asked. Celeste's haughty attitude had disappeared. Today, she was much easier to talk to. I realized that I was rude to you yesterday, and my friends criticized your mother. I apologize for that. But Celeste was feeling very wrong on the inside. This was the only way to make Stephen break the contract and give her back her freedom. And so, she swallowed her pride and held back her anger. Anna, Brooke, and Eva also reluctantly gave Stephen their apology. We're sorry. We shouldn't have blamed your mother. Apology accepted, Stephen nodded, and then looked at Tien. It's your turn. Tien came forward and said, Sorry, I was wrong. Now can we break the engagement? Celeste asked impatiently. Of course we can, but it seems like you've forgotten one thing. Celeste frowned. What is it? Don't tell me you want to go back on your word. You're not part of the Addams family anymore, but you were once a member. How could you do such a despicable thing? She was worried that Stephen wanted to take this opportunity to make some unreasonable demands, like one that involved her body. You're thinking too much, Stephen said. He gestured to Tien. Yesterday, I said yes to get on his knees and apologize. Remember? Tien scoffed. You want me to kneel to you? That's impossible. Apologizing had been humiliating enough. Kneeling was out of the question. Stephen turned to Celeste. My request is simple. I want him to get on his knees. As long as he does that, I'll break the contract. Of course, the decision is yours. Celeste, Anna, Brooke, and Eva shifted their gazes to Tien at the same time. Tien's stomach sank. Celeste, don't you think this is a bit much? He was hesitating, so Celeste gave him an eager look. Help me one last time. If you really want to marry me, you'll have to be able to adapt to circumstances and be a true man. Tien gritted his teeth. Okay, if that's what you want. He took a deep breath and recited, This is for Celeste, in his head. He slowly lowered himself to his knees and apologized again. Tien was thoroughly humiliated. He couldn't believe that he was kneeling to an illegitimate son. Stephen nodded and took out the Lindsay family's contract. The 5 of them fixed their gazes on the document. Celeste's eyes were wide as she stared at the paper that had restricted her youth. Today, it was finally going to be destroyed. Under the watchful gazes, Stephen tore the contract in half. It's done. Our arranged marriage is no longer valid. From today onwards, you have nothing to do with me. Please return to where you came from and don't come back. Don't disrupt my life." Celeste's lips curled into a smirk. She had to restrain herself up until this point because of the contract. She had to think twice before she spoke, and she was constantly worried that Tien would be impulsive. But the contract was torn. Nothing was holding her back. "You really know how to flatter yourself. I should be saying that to you. You're just an illegitimate son with no status. There's nothing worth bothering you for." Anna, Brooke, and Eva felt the same way. They chattered away and criticized Stephen without restraint. "He's just a nobody. He has nothing going for him. Why don't you take a look at yourself in the mirror? What qualifications do you have to be Celeste's arranged marriage partner? Fortunately, you know your limits. That's why you ripped the contract." Celeste's confidence was fueled by their remarks. "Stephen, you told me yesterday that I'm not as good as your wife. Then please ask her to come out. I want to see just how different we are." "Yeah, tell her to get out here," Anna said. "I don't believe a woman more beautiful than Celeste exists." "None of you are qualified to make her acquaintance," Stephen said coldly. "But what I can tell you is, even if you're the most beautiful woman in the world, my wife will always be number one in my eyes." Celeste was at a loss for words. "There's no need to be so angry," he continued. "No one can compete with Kim." The rest of them were stunned. Everyone back home was constantly praising Celeste for her beauty. The most beautiful woman in Annapolis was a title that she deserved. It was ridiculous that Stephen didn't fancy her. "So you broke the contract because I can't compete with your wife?" Celeste asked. "You could say that, but no one can compete with her. If it weren't for your friend's disrespect towards my mother, I would have broken the contract when your friends came to my company. There would have been no need for you or Tien to come all the way here." Anna, Brooke, and Eva looked at each other. Celeste had been right. Stephen had refused to tear the contract because of how they'd spoken to his mother. Celeste couldn't shake the unfairness that she was feeling. Before coming to Washington, D.C., she'd dressed down on purpose and removed her makeup. She wanted Stephen to see how hard it had been for her all these years, but she also wanted to prevent him from being enamored by her looks. If he wasn't impressed by her appearance, then that would give him more of a reason to break the contract. Unfortunately, Celeste's plan was flawed because nothing could conceal her beauty. Tien could attest to that. Her charm emanated from deep within her. Either way, Celeste had gotten what she'd wanted, but she couldn't understand why Stephen would choose Kim over her. The only explanation was that she hadn't appeared before him in her true, beautiful self. She suddenly felt an impulse to make Stephen choose her. Because of her beauty, Celeste had been at the center of attention since she was young. She couldn't accept this. "Stephen, when do you have time to visit Annapolis?" "Why?" "I'll invite you as a guest to my family's home and appear in front of you in the most beautiful way possible. I'll make you realize that it was a mistake to choose Kim over me." "You're really confident in yourself, but there's no need for me to go there. I made my decision a long time ago. I can tell you right now, no matter how beautifully you're dressed, in my eyes, it will never match up to Kim. She's the only one for me." "Don't be so full of yourself," Celeste retorted. "On that day, I guarantee you'll truly understand the definition of beauty." "Continuing this conversation is pointless," Stephen said. "I'll never regret my decision. Not now, not ever." Tien had enough. "Celeste, why waste your precious time talking to someone like him?" He cracked his knuckles. "I'll make him regret it right now." Tien had been humiliated more than once ever since he had arrived in Washington, D.C., and more importantly, he couldn't forgive Stephen for looking down on the woman he loved. He'd been holding himself back for quite some time now. The contract was broken, so his pent-up frustrations were about to explode. Tien was so caught up in his anger that he'd forgotten Johan's warning. An intense aura seeped out as he walked towards Stephen. Celeste, Anna, Brooke, and Eva took a cautious step back. In the past, everyone who'd provoked Tien to this point had been killed by his hand. Celeste, Anna, Brooke, and Eva suddenly remembered Johan's warning from yesterday. If Tien killed Stephen, that would be the end of the line for him and the Val family. But how are they supposed to convince Tien when he'd already made his mind up about killing Stephen? Being ranked second wasn't just for show. Trying to jump in between them would be risking their lives. As Tien approached, Stephen made no move to escape. "Hey, why aren't you running away?" Celeste shouted. "If you don't want to die, then hurry up and leave." Stephen ignored her and folded his arms over his chest. He looked calm and composed for someone who was about to be beaten to the ground. Tien stepped in front of Stephen and raised his right hand. Celeste and the others shut their eyes in a panic. This was it for Tien, and maybe them too. The Addams family was merciless. There was a brief silence, followed by the sound of someone getting slapped. They cracked open an eye and gasped. Instead of seeing Stephen being pummeled to death, they saw him slapping Tien across the face for a second time. Tien's face was swollen. He stood there, too dumbfounded to react. His aura from earlier had vanished. It took a few seconds for Tien to realize what had happened. His expression changed. "How dare you hit me?" Stephen grinned. "What are you going to do about it?" Tien's aura returned in full force. "Wait, Tien!" Celeste called out. "Did you forget Mr. Johan's warning?" Tien stopped in his tracks at the mention of Johan. The arranged marriage contract had been broken, and he was free to marry Celeste. It wouldn't be worth it to offend the Addams family. He held back his anger and glowered at Stephen. "Just wait. I'll grind you into meat paste one of these days." Stephen shrugged. "You couldn't even turn me into meat paste now. What makes you think you'll be capable of that in the future?" "Humph, just you wait." Tien turned around and walked away. Celeste didn't immediately follow him. She glanced at Stephen. "Tien's leaving. We should go with him," Anna, Brooke, and Eva said. Celeste bit her lip and ran after them. She felt like she'd lost to Kim, but this wasn't over. She would make Stephen regret his decision in the near future. The four great generals appeared right after they left. "I didn't think the dignified, second-ranked Tien Val would be this overpowered in front of you, Mr. Addams," Dennis said with a sigh. "Before I joined the army, I was intimidated by Dimitri's strength. Now it seems like he's no match for any of us. It's a shame that he wasn't here. You could have slapped him too." Stephen smiled in amusement. "Don't worry, Dennis. When it's time for us to go to Annapolis, I'll give you an opportunity to slap Dimitri yourself." Dennis laughed. "I'm looking forward to it." "Mr. Addams, the military bases are planning to organize a training camp since the border has been quiet lately," Rosalind reported. "They plan to select talented candidates from across the country. After they pass the training camp, they'll join the Armored Cavalry Battalion." Stephen nodded. "There's quite a few members of the battalion transferring to other posts this year, right?" "Yes, 10 of them were assigned to special forces of various military bases as captains." "Okay, we'll let Callan decide on the candidates. The training camp will take place in Washington, D.C.'s military base. There's nothing to worry about if Callan and Juan are in charge of it." Celeste and Tien's return to Annapolis caused a huge commotion. First, Celeste's arranged marriage with Stephen had been annulled. She was no longer bound to the Addams family. Second, Tien, who was ranked second amongst the youths in the city, had been slapped so hard by Stephen that one side of his face was swollen. Tien was utterly humiliated, so he holed himself up at home for indoor training. He didn't even stop by the Lindsay family's residence to ask for Celeste's hand in marriage. The other rich youths of the city seized the opportunity to pursue her. They were hesitant before because of the contract and Tien's relentless pursuit. Now, they didn't have to worry about either of those things. "Terrence, have you heard?" Laurel asked, stepping into his study with Johan. "Stephen canceled his arranged marriage with some girl from the city. I heard you were the one who drafted the contract." "That good-for-nothing," Terrence spat. "Canceling a contract that we proposed is a disgrace to our family. He's an illegitimate son, but he used to live here. His actions are a reflection of the Addams family." "I called Tien and told him not to use force when dealing with Stephen," Johan said. "I never thought that Stephen would be this incompetent. Not only did he break the contract, he even slapped Tien twice." "I heard about that too," Laurel said. "Did that really happen?" Terrence asked in disbelief. Yes, I heard from other people that when Tien returned to the city, his face was swollen, Laurel explained. It must have been embarrassing. After he went home, he shut himself inside his house and hasn't been seen in public since. Even Celeste has been laying low. Terrence's brows furrowed. I know what Tien's capable of. He's not ranked second for nothing. How did Stephen manage to land a hit on him? Laurel rolled her eyes. It's obvious. Johan asked Tien not to use force. That's why he didn't retaliate even after being slapped 2 times. So that's how it is. Terrence returned to Johan. He shouldn't have protected Stephen. Now that he's seen how powerful our family's name is, he'll continue to use it to flaunt and swindle others. He'll keep ruining our reputation because he knows that none of them can retaliate. But what if we let Tien beat him up? Wouldn't that disgrace our family as well? Johan protested. Johan, you have to understand that I made a bet with Stephen. The soonest he'll have an affiliation with us is in a year, and that's only if he meets the requirements to return to the family. Before that, he had nothing to do with us. Whether he's alive or dead is none of our business. Okay, I'll keep that in mind, Dad. Terrence, I suggest you make an announcement that Stephen has no connection to our Addams family, Laurel suggested. Make it known that we don't care what he does outside. He'll deal with his consequences by himself, even if he has to die for it. That's a good idea. Even if he uses our family's name, no one will take him seriously. Laurel chuckled. It seems like he has a short fuse. He attacked Tien without thinking, so I'm positive he acted recklessly before and made quite a few enemies. Once you make your announcement, many people will come after him. Forget about the bet in a year. It'll be a miracle if he can survive 6 months. If he can survive the next 6 months, then I'll consider it my loss, Terrence said confidently. The reason they were so confident was that many of their family members had joined the military. An announcement for the annual training camp had been made public. Out of the 100 people on the list, 5 of them were from the Addams family. Another 10 were from their branches. Unlike the announcement, the list of participants hadn't been made public, but as the #1 family in the country, they had the means to obtain the list the moment his participation had been decided. Terrence flipped through the list, feeling gratified. Take a good look at the list of participants. The future of our family is more promising than I thought. I heard that the training camp is being held to recruit members for the Armored Cavalry Battalion, which is under the Commander-in-Chief's command, Johan said. Based on this list, there's a high chance that the participants from our family will win. It's an honor to work under the commander, and their experiences will help them secure a place in the combat sovereignty rankings. As the current head of the family, Terrence hoped to achieve great things during his time. The stronger their members became, the more consolidated the family's status as ranked first in the country would be. This achievement would be his alone. I wouldn't have to go through the trouble of making an announcement if Stephen had the skills to be ranked on the combat sovereignty rankings. He'll never make the list, Laurel said. Participating in the training camp is already a difficult task for him. If he had the qualifications to join, then I wouldn't mind letting him back into the family. But unfortunately, he doesn't. Tien had been hiding in his room ever since he came back from Washington, D.C. He was in low spirits until one of his subordinates came running and reported that Terrence had made an announcement. Terrence had declared that he and Stephen had no connection with each other. Tien jumped out of bed and flung open the door. He grabbed his subordinate's collar. Is that true? Yes, the entire city knows about it. Tien let him go and laughed wildly. He was confident that he would run into Stephen sooner or later. Now that the Addams family had made it official that they had no affiliation, he would have an opportunity to pay Stephen back for humiliating him. Everyone in the city knew that Stephen had slapped him twice and sent him packing back to Annapolis. He'd lost all faith, and he would pay him back tenfold. But first things first, he had to pay a visit to the Lindsay family's residence and ask for Celeste's hand in marriage. Stephen's life had been peaceful after Celeste, Tien, and their friends left Washington, D.C. As Kim's pregnancy progressed, he started staying home every day to accompany her. He took her to the hospital for her routine checkups. He stayed by her side and fussed over her. To spend more time with Kim, Stephen handed all his authority to Jasmine. But a powerful shareholder was suppressing the Wyvern Group. Without Stephen in control, his company's business was shrinking day by day. Even doing business in the district was becoming difficult. Kim was concerned when she found out about it. The bet between Stephen and the Addams family was still far away, but if the Wyvern Group was ruined before the day came, he wouldn't have anything to use to fight back. "Kim, I know what you're thinking," Stephen said. "I've been making preparations, so you don't have to worry. My priority is to accompany you until our child is born." "You have? I haven't seen you do anything besides sitting next to me all day." Stephen gave her a cryptic smile. "It's true. Think of it as one of my other secrets." Kim recalled their wedding day. She was surprised when Stephen announced that he was the owner of the Wyvern Group. Perhaps he still had many secrets that he had yet to reveal. The days passed peacefully, and the training camp was rapidly approaching. The participants who had been selected from all over the country were preparing for their trip to Washington, D.C.'s military base. Callan was in charge of the training camp. "Mr. Adams, our official start date will be 3 days from now. We've selected many outstanding talents this year. If you have time, why don't you come and see for yourself?" For those who passed the training, there would be an opportunity to become members of the Armored Cavalry Battalion, so Stephen agreed. "I'll be there." "Great. I want to invite you to teach the first lesson." The participants this year were particularly talented, and Callan wanted to boost their motivation by having the Commander-in-Chief make an appearance. Stephen agreed without hesitation. "Did he agree to it?" Juan asked when the call ended. Callan flashed a triumphant grin. "Yeah, he did. This will be the first time the Commander-in-Chief will be attending the annual training camp. We should keep this a secret from the participants. It'll be a surprise." "Understood," Juan said gravely. The participants set off for their trip to Washington, D.C. The Addams family was no exception. 5 off-road jeeps were parked in row in front of the main gates. They had been prepared for the 5 members of the Branch families who had chosen to join the training camp. Terrence came out to personally see them off, which made them quite proud. The leader of the group was Fabian Adams. He was the oldest among them, so he had been chosen to lead. Fabian shouted at the other 4. "All of you, listen up. We've been chosen to participate in the training camp because they recognized our talent. We represent the Addams family, so be mindful of your actions." "We'll be careful," they replied. "All right. This year, they're holding the training camp to recruit members of the Armored Cavalry Battalion. There are 100 of us, but only 10 will be selected. All 5 of us have to secure a position in the battalion. None of us can fall. Do you all understand?" "Understood," they replied in unison. "Okay, let's head out." The 5 of them said their goodbyes to Terrence and set off for Washington, D.C. "If I'm selected to be a member of the Armored Cavalry Battalion, I would become one of the Commander-in-Chief's personal guards. It would be a great honor," the youngest, Merrick, said. Fabian nodded. 6 years ago, the commander became a role model for the younger generation across the country. His achievements were unprecedented. Even the strongest person in the Addams family, Johan, sees him as his role model. His dream is to surpass him. "I'm not as strong as Johan, and I don't have ambitions like him, but working for the commander is my goal." Someone else chimed in. "I heard the training camp is jointly organized by 2 military bases, one in the south and the other being Washington, D.C.'s military base. Our training camp will be taking place deep in the mountains in Washington, D.C. Stephen's supposedly in the district right now. I really want to meet him." "It's not just you," Fabian said. "I want to meet him too. He looked down on Johan and proposed a 1-year bet with Mr. Terrence. If I ever get the chance, I'll teach him a lesson." The other 4 were thinking the same thing. After a few hours of travel, they arrived at Washington, D.C.'s military base. The rest of the participants had also arrived. They were elites from across the country. Each of them had a formidable demeanor and wasn't easy to intimidate. At 6 o'clock in the morning, all 100 participants were on the field. They had lined up and were waiting for the commanding officers to speak. Callan Meadows, the organizer of the training camp, and the commander of the military base in the South were on the platform accompanied by Juan Lovell, the commander of Washington, D.C.'s military base. Callan scanned the participants and began his opening speech. Welcome to the annual training camp. I believe everyone is aware that we're recruiting members for the Armored Cavalry Battalion. You are all here today because you're elites of the country's younger generation. The participants stood a little straighter at the compliment. They were the pride of the country. A certain instructor will be coming tomorrow for the first lesson. Callan's announcement piqued the participants' curiosity. Sir, may I ask if the instructor is one of the sharpshooters under your command? Fabian asked. Callan had 4 skilled sharpshooters who worked closely with him. They had gained fame during the last conflict and became role models for the younger generation in the military. No, it's not them, Callan replied. Is it Tyrone Floyd, the commander of Washington, D.C.'s Special Combat Brigade? Another participant asked. Tyrone was another famed soldier and role model for the younger generation. He'd once broken into the enemy's camp alone and saved 10 citizens of the U.S. He was known as the White Horse Silver Spear. No, it's not him, Callan answered. A few more names were called out, but the answer was still no. There's no need to guess. Your first lesson will be tomorrow, so all of you will be meeting him then. Callan had finished his piece, so Juan took over and continued with his own speech. Both of their speeches were simple and practical. They were nothing like the speeches aired on TV. The 100 participants were dismissed after the opening speeches. They were to wait for their first lesson, which would be held tomorrow morning. The participants were separated into groups of 2s and 3s and discussed amongst themselves. The 5 members of the Adam family's main branch gathered together. Why was Captain Meadows being so mysterious? Fabian said impatiently. Everyone knows that the strongest soldiers in the Southern military base are his 4 sharpshooters, and the strongest in Washington, D.C.'s military base is Captain Floyd. If they're not coming, it's proof that this year's training camp is of low standards. Fidel, who was from another state, came over and joined their conversation. I agreed to participate in the training camp because of Captain Meadows' 4 sharpshooters and Captain Floyd. If they're not coming, there's no point in staying here. Merrick put a finger to his lips and shushed him. Lower your voice. You'll be in big trouble if the commanding officers hear you. Fidel didn't lower his voice. He spoke even louder. What are you afraid of? Captain Meadows already said that we're elites. Some of us are as strong as the instructors. If this mysterious instructor isn't on our level, then why should we learn from him? You have a point, Fabian said. We should show him what we're capable of when he arrives tomorrow. If he's not up to par, we'll tell him to get lost. Another participant interrupted. Captain Meadows won't assign us a better instructor if we don't do anything. The rest of the participants joined in. We are elites. Not just anyone is qualified to teach us. I can't wait for tomorrow. A good show is waiting for us. The first day passed in a flash. Early the next morning, Callan drove a jeep to Stephen's villa to pick him up. Seeing that Kim was also there, he greeted her with a smile. Mr. Adams promised that he would teach my students today. It'll take an entire day. Would that be okay with you? Kim glanced at Stephen from across the room. Displeasure was written all over her face. He stays home with me every day. He has plenty of time. To be honest, Kim was a little annoyed that Stephen had left the Wyvern Group's affairs on the back burner. His business was shrinking day by day, and the deadline for the bet was getting closer. She was more worried than ever. Callan laughed awkwardly. Thank you, Miss Kim. Kim gave him a thoughtful look. I can tell that you and Stephen are close. Can I ask you something? Sure, what is it? You heard about the bet between Stephen and the Adams family, right? Yes, I've heard about it. It's been 2 months, and I haven't seen Stephen making any sort of preparations. As his friend, can you advise him to take it more seriously? Oh, is that all? Callan thought that something serious had happened because of the grave look on Kim's face. Miss Kim, you don't have to worry. The bet isn't a big deal to Mr. Adams. Although the Adams family was ranked first in the country, they weren't considered a real opponent to the commander-in-chief. Even Callan himself would be able to defeat Terrence. But the problem was that Kim didn't know Stephen's real identity. She thought that he was an ordinary person like her. Kim wasn't sure what to make of Callan's response. He and Stephen had been the same carefree personality. This was the #1 family in the country they were talking about. Not just anyone could provoke him. Cal, I'm afraid you don't know what the Addams family is capable of. They're ranked first in the country, and they've been around for 1,000 years. Stephen was reckless when he made a bet with them. I'm really worried about him. Callan glanced at Stephen and saw him shaking his head. It seemed like he still hadn't revealed his identity. Callan had no other choice but to go along with it. Miss Kim, your concern for Mr. Addams has touched my heart. I'll try to persuade him later. Kim was satisfied with his answer. Thank you. I feel much more reassured. Callan and Stephen got in the Jeep and headed to Washington, D.C.'s military base. You haven't told your wife about your military background yet? Callan asked. How long are you going to keep it a secret? She's pregnant, so I didn't want to shock her too much. She'll find out when I confront the Addams family. Stephen had already thought about it. Their child would be born around the same time as the deadline for the bet. Stephen wouldn't have to worry about them when he fought the Addams family. Speaking of the Addams family, more than 10 of them are from either the main branch or their side branches, Callan remarked. 5 of them are from the main branch. Oh, really? I'm interested in seeing how capable their younger generation is, Stephen said. When we get there, don't reveal my identity. There's no point if they find out I'm the commander-in-chief as soon as I arrive. Okay, I'll get someone else to escort you inside. At the entrance, 2 liaison officers from the logistics department were waiting for them in another Jeep. This is the instructor for the first lesson. Take him to the camp, Callan said. The liaison officers were surprised. The instructor was younger than they'd expected. He looked like he was in his 20s. For someone so young, how extensive could his resume be? Would he even be able to make the participants listen to him? Stephen got in the back seat and closed his eyes. The liaison officers thought he was tired from the long journey. They glanced at him in the rearview mirror to make sure he was asleep before whispering to each other. Look at him. He couldn't even handle the long ride. How can he be the instructor? I heard that the 100 participants are elites of their respective territories. Their strength is no joke. Yesterday afternoon, they held a private sparring session with the participants. A few veterans from our military base couldn't win against them. If Captain Meadows wants this guy to teach them, it'll be a disaster. Our team will become a laughingstock. Then wouldn't it be a better idea to leave him here and observe him? Why? Don't you think it'll be amusing to watch him get beat up by those troublemakers? Are you thinking of entertainment at a time like this? Of course not. I was thinking that if he gets beat up, Captain Meadows might ask us to come back and take him to the hospital. It'll save us the trouble of assessing him ourselves. The 2 liaison officers had no idea that Stephen had overheard their hushed conversation. He didn't open his eyes, and he didn't say anything. Soon, they arrived at the camp. The 100 participants turned their attention to the Jeep. Compared to the neat lineup from yesterday, they were sitting or lying on the ground. They looked sloppy. Clearly, they weren't expecting much from the mysterious instructor. He's here, Merrick whispered. Fabian perked up. Okay, let's show him what we're made of. We'll beat him up and make him regret coming here, Fidel said. The rest of the participants were looking forward to it. The liaison officers pulled up to the camp and turned around to look at Stephen, who was still pretending to be asleep in the back seat. We're here. Stephen opened his eyes and nodded. They led him to the participants. The liaison officers glanced at each other when they saw their messy formation. These were troublemakers indeed. Stephen frowned when he saw them. These were the elites from across the country, but none of them resembled soldiers. How were they any different from those who had no combat strength? Strict discipline was the basic. Laziness would not be tolerated. The participants stared at the new arrival. He appeared to be less than 30 years old. He definitely wasn't qualified to be their instructor. The liaison officers led Stephen to the front of the group. Everyone, let me introduce you. This is your instructor for the first lesson. Please give him a round of applause. They took the lead and applauded Stephen. As the seconds passed, they realized that they were the only ones clapping. The atmosphere had turned awkward. The participants didn't stand up to greet their instructor. They remained sitting or lying down. "Is that the mysterious instructor?" Fidel called out. "There's nothing mysterious about him. The instructors for this year's training camp are worse than average. It's unacceptable." "It's obvious from his appearance," Fabian added. "He doesn't have the qualifications to teach us." "This is the instructor who Captain Meadows appointed," the liaison officer said. "You should give him a chance." Several participants snickered. "Sure, we can do that," Fidel said. "Tell him to get on all fours and run a few laps around the field. Then we'll give him a chance." The liaison officers looked at each other in dismay. These participants were going too far. Putting aside Stephen's qualifications, he was an instructor who Captain Meadows had invited. He was their instructor, whether they acknowledged him or not. The liaison officers glanced at Stephen, waiting to see how he would respond. Stephen wasn't pleased. They had no respect for their instructors or their superiors. The concept of being elite had gotten to their heads. Stephen was the Grand Palace Master, who had more than half of the world's wealth and influence in his possession, but he'd never even considered himself to be the best, let alone this rowdy group. Being disrespectful towards their instructor and superiors was proof of their lack of determination to learn. If they thought they were the best at this level, then they would never be able to reach their full potential. This would be their limit. The identity and background of the instructor weren't important. The fact that Callan had personally chosen an instructor was enough to prove that he was qualified to teach them. Students should show their instructors respect, but did this rowdy group of participants have any intention of respecting him? Not at all. "Everyone, stand up and get in line!" Stephen shouted. His voice echoed around the field. One by one, the participants stood up, as if it were a conditioned reflex, but they maintained their sluggish posture. Stephen's gaze swept across the field. "Get in line!" No one moved. "Is this the attitude of the training camp's participants this year? Do you want to join the Armored Cavalry Battalion? I don't think you have a right to even be here. If you don't want to get in line, then you can take off your military uniform and go home." Among the 100 participants, some began to line up. "You say that we don't have a right to stand here, but what about you?" Fabian retorted. "Are you qualified to be our instructor?" "Are you feeling uncomfortable because we're not acknowledging you as our instructor?" Fidel said. "It's good that you feel that way. We came here to receive training from those who are stronger than us. We don't need someone chosen at random." Fidel guessed that their instructor was from a third-generation family of officials or a third-generation military family. He wouldn't be surprised if their instructor had used his family's connections to forge a connection with Callan and got this job to pave the way for his future. "We can respect you, but you have to convince us with your skills," Fabian said. The other participants joined in. "You're so young. You don't have what it takes to be our instructor. We're the elites of the country. We came here to learn and improve. How can you be our instructor if you're weaker than us?" The liaison officers stayed quiet and watched the entertaining scene before them. Stephen scanned the crowd. "If I wasn't qualified to be your instructor, I wouldn't be standing here." The participants were amused when Stephen didn't back down. "We could accept you as our instructor, but the least you could do is demonstrate your strength," Fabian said. "I'm guessing you're not on the same level as Captain Meadows' sharpshooters or Captain Floyd, but as our instructor, you should come close." "Let's set a standard," Fidel added. "We'll acknowledge you if you're on the combat sovereignty rankings, so please tell us where you rank." The combat sovereignty rankings consisted of 100 of the strongest soldiers in the military. Achieving a rank was the dream of every soldier. Callan's 4 sharpshooters and Tyrone were on the list. The liaison officers exchanged a glance. They had memorized the 100 names on the combat sovereignty rankings, but the instructor in front of them was not on the list. Sure enough, Stephen shook his head. "My name isn't on there." All the members of the Armored Cavalry Battalion were more skilled than the soldiers listed on the combat sovereignty rankings. Their identities were confidential, with the same confidentiality level as the commander-in-chief, so their names wouldn't appear on a public ranking. Several participants laughed and regarded him with more contempt. Stephen ignored them. "Are you disappointed that I'm not on the list? I'll let you in on a secret. Those on the list aren't as strong as me." Everyone froze, including the liaison officers. Making big claims like that was unheard of. The 100 soldiers on the combat sovereignty rankings are famous, the liaison officer said. Even our enemies fear them. Many of them are from upper-class families across the country. Claiming that you're stronger than them is an insult. I know the participants are disrespectful and you're not happy about that, but you can't sully their names, the other liaison officer said. The combat sovereignty rankings represented the highest standard of the military. No one was stronger than the 100 names on the list. For example, Callan's 4 sharpshooters in Tyrone could fight head-on with 10,000 soldiers by themselves. The enemies feared them on the battlefield. But however strong they might be, their rankings on the list were relatively low. It was hard to imagine how strong the soldiers at the top of the list were in comparison. The instructor that Callan had chosen was only in his 20s. It was obvious that he was lying through his teeth. I know very well what I'm saying, Stephen said calmly. Like I said before, I'm stronger than everyone on the list. Silence filled the field. A moment passed before anyone spoke. Even the Addams family wouldn't make big claims like that, Fabian said. Maybe he should change professions and become a comedian, Fidel joked. I don't know if he's that funny, but what I do know is that he's offended the 100 soldiers on the combat sovereignty rankings, Merrick added. Fidel laughed. Maybe he doesn't know who's on the list. Since Captain Meadows invited him, he should at least know how strong he is. On the combat sovereignty rankings, Captain Meadows is ranked 20th. His claims are an insult to the superior who invited him here. The participants were furious. Some of them were hot-tempered and were about to teach the instructor a lesson when Fabian stopped them. We'll give you a chance to show off. Prove that your claims are valid. The other participants supported Fabian's suggestion and started talking all at once. Good idea. I need him to prove it to me. Otherwise, I won't be convinced. Claiming to be stronger than the soldiers on the combat sovereignty rankings is a great insult. If he's able to demonstrate his skills, then I'll pretend he never trash-talked them. Asking you to be stronger than them is asking for too much, but you should at least have the qualifications to rank on the list, right? When Stephen didn't reply, they continued to mock him. What is it? Are you scared? Merrick asked. You should know your limits. Don't talk big and look down on other people. Stephen finally spoke up. I didn't say anything, because I was wondering how I should demonstrate the strength of someone stronger than those on the combat sovereignty rankings. After all, weaklings like you have never seen the real deal. The 100 participants were the cream of the crop back home, but their backgrounds couldn't be compared to the commander-in-chief's. Are you looking down on us? Fidel demanded. You're so confident. I'd like to see for myself just how strong you are. He cracked his knuckles. Forget about the combat sovereignty rankings. If you can defeat any one of us, we'll submit to you. I agree, Merrick said. Showing respect to our instructors is nonsense. We follow the law of the jungle. Only those who are stronger than me deserve my respect. It wasn't just them. The other participants were just as eager to give their instructors a good beating. The liaison officers spread their hands helplessly. Sorry, but I don't think there's any other way. You'll have to show these troublemakers something. I understand, Stephen said. He looked around and spotted a shack that was the size of a small house not too far away from the field. The participants were puzzled when Stephen stepped off the platform and walked towards the shack. What's he trying to do? Fidel asked. Fabian shrugged. I don't know, but we'll find out if we follow him. We have to make sure he doesn't pull any tricks, Merrick said. Stephen did a quick search inside the shack to make sure no one was there. It took less than 5 minutes because there wasn't much to search through. The participants gathered in the front of the entrance with the liaison officers standing to the side. Stephen emerged from the shack and closed the door behind him. He clenched his fist and swung a punch at the side of the shack. The participants snickered. What's he doing? Is he venting his anger on the wall? But in the next second, the smiles on everyone's faces froze and morphed into shock, because a single punch had destroyed the shack. It collapsed in on itself in a shower of dust. Cracks appeared on the ground with the ruins of the shack at the center. They stared at their instructor in bewilderment. How strong did he have to be to destroy a shack with a single punch? The ground was cracked from the aftershock. Even the soldier ranked first on the combat sovereignty rankings wouldn't be capable of this. The liaison officers were just as dumbfounded. The youths these days were terrifying. Stephen dusted his hands and looked around the crowd. "What do you think? Do you acknowledge me as your instructor now?" Dead silence filled the air. The young instructor in front of them had been personally chosen by Callan. They should have known from the start that he was qualified to teach them. Stephen continued. "If some of you aren't convinced and think that this is normal, then you can step forward and compete with me. I'll take you up on your challenge." The participants lowered their gazes. Even Fidel, who'd been criticizing Stephen the most, stared at the ground and tried to blend in with the crowd. "Since no one wants to challenge me, then line up!" They scurried about like docile little sheep and lined up in a neat formation. Fabian and Fidel stood pin straight. Stephen's display of strength had subdued them. Just like he'd said, he was stronger than everyone on the combat sovereignty rankings. "Attention!" All 100 participants straightened and stood with their hands by their sides. "Class begins now. I'm your instructor for the first lesson."